And you're not allowed to rebut their garbage arguments either. If anyone tries to counter any of their bull snot with facts, they're banned from social media for bullying and harassment. I know this for a fact because it's happened to me more than once. Immune to criticism, these kids are allowed to bully and harass gun owners and businesses that support the Second Amendment all they want. And they slander the good names of Second Amendment defenders like Dana Lash, using the most despicable language to call us complicit in the murders of children just because we belong to the NRA and support the Second Amendment. A few days ago, Tucker Carlson had New Mexico congressional candidate Pat Davis on his show. Davis, a Democrat, of course, was getting inked because of his F the NRA television advertisement. Tucker asked him, how many mass shootings have been committed by NRA members? Davis refused to answer the question because he knows that the answer is 0. And Tucker tore him up. A second Davis campaign spot claimed that an AR-15 can fire 150 rounds a minute, which is actually about twice the actual rate of fire for a good shooter using a semi-automatic rifle. And I'm not even counting the time that it takes to change out a 30-round mag. Because maybe Davis used one of those full semi-automatic ghost guns to run his test. I don't know. I'd like to one if it can fire 150 rounds a minute. Now, if he gets elected, he'll be fast friends with California Democrat Representative Eric Swalwell, who recently called for a repeal of the Second Amendment. And I have to give him credit, though, because he was honest. Most of these lying gun grabbers will repeat the phrase over and over again, we don't want to take your guns. We don't want to take your guns. We don't want to take your guns. Over and over like it's a Tibetan meditation chant. But Swalwell had no problem telling us that confiscating guns is exactly what he wants to do. And he's not alone. Former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens wrote an editorial in the New York Times calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment 2 months ago. Attention horror, Shannon Watts, the dimmest bulb in the universe and head of Michael Bloomberg's funded Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, wants to take your guns too. She recently tweeted out a photo of a scary-looking black rifle to Sportsman's Warehouse demanding that they stop selling it. It wasn't an AR-15. It wasn't even a semi-automatic rifle. The rifle in question was a .22 caliber bolt-action Ruger. I want so badly to respond to her stupidity on Twitter with 280 characters of brutal truth, but I don't dare because whenever she's confronted with a fact, she blocks the person who presented it, and I need to be able to keep my eye on her so I can keep up with her lies. These people regularly inflate the numbers of school shootings in the U.S. while taking great pains to ignore the carnage on the streets of Chicago, where failed liberal governance, political correctness that fails to recognize the problem, and gang wars have resulted in more casualties since 2003 than soldiers who have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. I guess those black lives don't matter to gun control activists. If Chicago does happen to be mentioned, they say, well, the guns came from states with lax gun laws like Indiana. But that logic is fatally flawed. It's called liberal logic, because more guns equals more violence, they say. But if that were the case, Indianapolis would be the war zone, and not Chicago, where guns are all but banned. According to facts, the vast majority of gun homicides in Chicago are committed by drug gangs, and nearly all of the victims are black, which is a politically inconvenient truth for the press. But Chicago only ranks 25th on the list of America's most violent cities. If one were to discount similar murders in the top 4 Democratic-run hellholes of St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Detroit, the United States would be the 4th safest country on the planet. Instead of offering common sense gun solutions like posting armed guards in schools, which, assuming 1 guard per school, would create 8,000 jobs in Texas alone, what do Democrats suggest that we do to protect ourselves from a bad guy with a deadly weapon? Well, in one school district in Pennsylvania, they've started outfitting each room in their schools with a bucket of rocks. that students can throw at an active shooter. The University of Colorado suggests that female students being attacked by a rapist piss their pants to spoil his libido. Have you ever heard anything so stupid and idiotic in your life? I think my method's better. I trained my daughters to draw down on anyone who would assault them and make him piss his pants instead. After the shooting in Santa Fe, liberals all over the country once again raised the battle cry. Republicans and the NRA have blood on their hands before the bodies of those 10 precious children were even cold. Would you like me to tell you who and what is responsible for the violence that we're seeing today? The blood is on the hands of Democrats who've turned our cities into ghettos, destroying black families so they can keep voters who are dependent on the government to survive. In his new song, Ye versus the People, rap artist Kanye West observes, "That's the problem with this damn nation. All blacks gotta be Democrats. Man, we ain't made it off the plantation." The blood is on the hands of radical leftist teachers who have been teaching their students to think of all conservatives as Nazis that must be killed. The blood is on the hands of video game manufacturers who create games like Grand Theft Auto, where the object of the game is to assault, shoot, and run over as many innocent people as possible, while raping hookers, robbing liquor stores, and slaughtering police officers just because they wear a uniform. Our children are being desensitized by these video games. Their innate morality and empathy for others is being destroyed. And when they go out into the real world to carry out one of these horrific attacks, they act like they are still playing that game. The blood is on the hands of know-nothing, hypocritical actors and actresses in liberal Hollywood. They use their popularity to demand stricter gun control while they themselves are protected by armed security, and then go on to make movies which glorify gun violence. The blood is on the hands of anarcho-communist terrorist groups like Antifa and By Any Means Necessary, who take kids out into the streets to cause mayhem and punch Nazis because that's the cool thing to do. I have zero love for real Nazis, but if you have conservative values, respect our flag, and love our Constitution, then you are automatically a Nazi in the eyes of the left. The blood is on the hands of high school students who bully, marginalize, or ostracize kids that look different, act different, or lack age-appropriate social skills. Parkland student Emma Gonzalez admitted such behavior in her first televised speech, and I quote, "Since he was in middle school, it was no surprise to anyone who knew him to hear that Nicholas Cruz was the shooter. Those talking about how we should not have ostracized him didn't know this kid, okay? We did." Maybe if Nicholas Cruz hadn't been ostracized, maybe if his peers had lived up to all their kumbaya virtue signaling and acted like they gave a damn about him, he would not have decided to take revenge for years of abuse, and 14 children and 3 teachers would still be alive. The blood is on the hands of Big Pharma, which encourages doctors to prescribe potent psychotropic drugs to kids that don't need them, labeling them with made-up diagnoses like ADHD. You know, the treatment for ADHD is Ritalin or Adderall. It's basically methamphetamines. That's what real Nazis gave their troops to allow them to commit atrocities and not be racked by guilt. Every mass shooter in modern times, every single one, has had one thing in common. They were all on antidepressant medication, usually an SSRI. And the blood is on the hands of those who have refused to accept these simple truths. Almost all school shootings and or school-related acts of violence have been committed by those taking or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs. Between 2004 and 2012, there were nearly 15,000 reports to the FDA's MedWatch system on psychiatric drugs that caused violent side effects. I remember when I was a kid, the hardware store sold dynamite over the counter to farmers who needed to remove tree stumps or big rocks. Teenagers at my high school used to come to school with their hunting rifles on a rack on their trucks. There wasn't a rash of bombings or school shootings back then, but that was 50 years ago. So what's changed? Our society has changed to become more self-centered, greedy, and violent. The problem is a sickness in the hearts of Americans, a sickness that has been fed by the media and fake news outlets like CNN and MSNBC, a sickness that's been growing like a cancer since the 60s when God was taken out of our schools. Secular humanism is the new religion, and morality and empathy plays no role in it. This is truly the me generation. This sad state of affairs was prophesied by the Apostle Paul in the book of Second Timothy. He wrote, "In the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends. They will be reckless and puffed up with pride and love pleasure rather than God." Does that sound familiar, patriots? Hasn't the world become exactly the way Paul said it would be? The violence that we're seeing in our society today is one thing that the left cannot blame on guns or Christian conservative white men. We fought against the neo-communist agenda that's infected our schools and our culture, and we lost because we didn't fight hard enough. We were too afraid to offend anybody, and the violence that we're witnessing now is the result of a generation of progressive liberals who got their way like spoiled kids. Even though communism has failed every time that it's been tried and left a trail of 100 million dead bodies in its wake, those on the far left will cheat, lie, and steal to make their dream of a communist utopia come to pass. They will do and say anything to undermine us and our president and our culture. They failed to take down President Trump with their totally fabricated Russian collusion delusion, and now they've hung all of their hopes and dreams on the lies of a washed-up whore and her sleazy lawyer. They will fail again. I promise you this. And many of the filthy traitors behind this attempted soft coup are going to end up in prison for their efforts, including some of the highest-ranking employees of the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the State Department. If there's any justice left in the world, Hillary Clinton will be one of them. You'd like to see President Trump keep his campaign promise to lock her up, wouldn't you? All right, well, let's hear him from all the way from Lansing, Michigan. Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up! It's probably too much to hope that Barry Obama will join her in the Gray Bar Hotel, but hope springs eternal, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. People say that tyranny can't possibly come to America. Those people are wrong, and the founders knew it 200 years before they were born. The fact that more than a dozen top-ranking government officials conspired to conceal the crimes of Hillary Clinton and make up crimes with which to bring down the duly elected president of these United States is absolute proof that there is a seditious deep state that will do anything to maintain power, even commit treason. This is why the founders wrote the Second Amendment, so that we can protect our natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness against tyrants in our own government, if necessary. Lost in the conversation about guns is the fact that the Second Amendment is not about personal protection. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. The founders were not fearful of a deer uprising. The Second Amendment was written to give we the people the ability to shoot back at a government turned over to tyrants so that we could maintain the freedom that they fought, bled, and died for their children to enjoy. Even if those who would see us disarmed were able to ban semi-automatic rifles, and I'm not going to call them assault rifles because there's no such thing, it would make precious little difference to those determined to take the lives of innocents. Bill Clinton's ban on AR-15 in the 90s proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. The ban did not affect the numbers of shootings at all, but it did screw the Democrats out of a midterm victory. And Republican lawmakers need to remember that lesson. Guns are not the enemy. They're simply tools. The enemy is the so-called resistance, progressive values, violent video games and music, and psychotropic drugs that are turning our children into killers. If someone determined to kill can't use a gun, they will use any other method at their disposal. Sayfullah Saipov swore allegiance to ISIS and used a rental truck to kill 8 and injure 7 more on a bike path in New York City last year. And the ISIS magazine Inspire is telling wannabe jihadists how to commit terrorist attacks without conventional weapons. Also in New York, a man by the name of Julio Gonzalez killed 87 people when he used a few gallons of gasoline and a book of matches to torch the Happy Land Social Club in the Bronx. The ISIS-inspired Sarnea brothers used pressure cookers filled with crushed up 4th of July sparklers to kill 3 and injure hundreds more at the Boston Marathon. Timothy McVeigh snuffed out the lives of 168 innocent people and maimed another 680 when he blew up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City with a rental truck filled with fertilizer and racing fuel. In the worst terrorist attack the U.S. has ever experienced, Muslim terrorists killed more than 3,000 people using nothing more than box cutters and pepper spray. America does not have a gun problem, patriots. We have a problem of the heart. And until somebody can come up with a test that can determine the contents of a person's soul, there will always be evil people who will use any method at their disposal to kill innocents at school, at work, or at play. Further restricting guns is not the answer, especially not now that we are at war with radical Islam and the far left, whose inexplicable hatred for Donald Trump and those who voted him into office is driving them to betray our country and commit horrible crimes against innocent Americans. When any trip to our children's schools, a mall, a sporting event, or a movie theater can turn into a life or death situation, we the people must be armed and ready to meet that threat and neutralize it. Every single one of you is a member of the militia mentioned in the Second Amendment, and you must be prepared to defend yourselves, your families, and your communities from crazies, religious fanatics, and tyrants. We've grown soft, spoiled by microwave dinners, cable television, and the wonders of the internet. We suffer from what's called normalcy bias, which causes us to discount and deny that there are any real threats to our freedom out there. We must get serious about the security of our country, ourselves, and our children. We can never let our guard down, because that's how you get killed. Our forefathers fought a war in the name of liberty and carved out a new nation rooted in truth and the natural rights of men, establishing a government based on the Constitution that John Adams stated was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. If we wish to remain free men and women, we must remember that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So when this rally is over, I want you to go forth from this place, patriots. Remain vigilant and pray that our martial skills will never be called upon to defend our lives or the Republic. God bless each one of you. Semper Fi and hoorah. Thank you very much. Right now, I'd like to bring up my good friend Rick Ector. He runs Rick's Firearm Academy in Detroit. He's an NRA certified weapons instructor, and he writes the blog Legally Armed in Detroit. Mr. Ector, would you grace us, sir?
Oh man, was that fiery or what? I mean, I'm back here on stage and I'm getting chills, man. Truly getting chills. But first and foremost, let me say to you all that I am truly glad to be here. All anyone has to do to get me to show up and to appear and tell me that there are going to be my fellow American citizens who have a right to bear arms, people who are willing to come out and speak in favor of that right and to gather and support one another. So I definitely, at this very moment, there's no place I'd rather be than to be here with you all today. To that end, man, Bobby really gave us a history lesson and took us all down through there, and I truly appreciate that. The one thing that I really felt on my heart to really talk about today is the Second Amendment and how from a practical day-to-day standpoint we can apply it and use it to address some issues that are confronting our communities. The biggest atrocity that is happening in our major urban areas and in communities all over the country is affecting the fairer sex. It's affecting women. In the city of Detroit alone, every year, it's never talked about. Even when you look at our criminal statistics, the crime of rape is a huge problem. You look at the statistics in the city of Detroit going back year after year after year. These criminal sexual assaults are happening on the range of at least 500 every year. It is the greatest crime against women that's not being talked about, it's not being addressed. Even when our local leaders tell us, hey, we think we got a handle on crime. We believe that homicides are down. We believe that armed robberies are down. You know, there are some people in the media who even question as to whether those statistics are real, and they point to the fact that the state of Michigan, who tabulates those crime statistics, they no longer accepted them from the Detroit Police Department. The point being is that it's rough out there, and it's especially hard on women, and women need to take on a more active role in their personal protection. Approximately 7 years ago, I saw a news story that truly affected me. It was a story in the city of Detroit where a woman's body had been beaten, raped, and discarded in the street as if it was just trash. And I was thinking to myself, wow, that's heavy, that's deep. Someone should do something about that. And ironically, just a couple of days ago before this rally, a very similar crime occurred in Detroit. A woman was found naked in the city of Detroit, had obviously been violently attacked, and her body was found, and they brought her to the local hospital and they treated her, but she eventually succumbed to her injuries. And it just takes me back to that first story that really affected me and bothered me 7 years ago, man. Someone needs to do something. This is like a huge problem and no one's addressing it. So it came to me in an epiphany. You know, it was like a sudden stroke of genius, I'd say. You know, someone should just grab as many women as they can and ask them if they want to learn how to shoot a gun. You know, this is towards the period of time when I was making my migration from MySpace. You all remember MySpace, right? I made it from MySpace over to Facebook, where everyone seems to be hanging out right now. And I put out a post, and that post was, hey, this is directed to all women. Whoever you are, if you have a desire to take on a more active role in your personal protection, you know, just come to this place, come to this gun range and meet me and 4 other firearms instructors, and we will teach you how to shoot. We will remove all typical barriers that someone might face. Fear, uncertainty, a willing tutor, access to a firearm, ammunition and the fees that you pay the proprietors of these gun ranges to allow you to shoot and practice on their facility. So we did 50, and I felt pretty good about that, but there was something inside that said, you know what, you can do more, you can do better. The demand is out there. This is the first time that you're doing something. The first time that you're doing something is also the hardest time that you're doing something. Good friend of mine, Ken Blanchard, he runs the website Black Man with a Gun, and I was speaking with him in Detroit. He was a keynote speaker at a dinner that I had in Detroit years ago, and he said, man, look, you're on to something. You know, stay the course and continue to drive this. And I took his words to heart. And every year I tried to do this thing bigger and better every year. That following year we did 100 from our initial 50. And then we doubled it to 200. And then we added another 50% to 300, and then 400. And then last year, man, we had 600. And I'm here to tell you that tomorrow morning, I will be at a gun range in Metro Detroit in Taylor, and we expect to have 800 women who are having interest in taking on an active role in their personal protection. It takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of resources, it takes talking and getting people to do things. I've had an ammunition company, Aguilar Ammunition. They came through with 16,000 rounds of ammunition. Had 49 fellow firearms trainers agreed to donate their whole day to train these people and to keep them safe. I mean, it's just been a great activity, and I look forward to letting everyone know that the event was successful. The thing that also, in my mind, that is a factor is that gun ownership, despite being under constant attack, the fastest growing segment of our population that is adopting guns and gun ownership is women. And we need to embrace that. And we need to help them protect themselves and their families, because obviously, just looking at the stats for the city of Detroit, we're 500 rapes year after year after year, and nothing's being done. Sometimes you have to accept the fact that you are your protector. You are your family's protector. It depends on you to make sure that you are safe. Yes, it's great to have the government, the local government, whether it's our police departments or it's our county sheriff's offices or the state police or the federal government. Yeah, it's nice to have those resources, but you need to be your first responder. Whether you are female or you are male, you need to be able to keep yourself safe. And that's the message that I have here today. I want to thank you all for coming out, and thank you for allowing me to speak and address to you all. And I want you all to have a great day. Thank you.